Good morning, everyone. This is the first time I'm participating in this conference, so I'm very excited to get to know so many people working on floods from different aspects and different angles. The name of this conference is Floods and People. And I remember that in the session of Tuesday morning, there was some comments about who is losing what and what is a loss and who is losing that. And also someone mentioned bad floods and good floods. And thinking about that, I just want to bring this phrase, paraphrasing what the community from Bocas del Palo at the Upper Cauca River Basin in Colombia think about floods. For them, the flood is like when the river is visiting them, because the river is bringing the nutrients for the land to grow food. And in that sense, my presentation today is about an approach to assess multiple water security risks in river basins. I belong to this hub, to the Water Security Sustainable Development Hub. There are several colleagues here from this hub in this conference. My name is Carolina Montoya Pachongo. I work with Barbara Evans and Miller Camargo here at the University of Leeds in the School of Civil Engineering. But this work is also a joint effort with colleagues and people from the School of Politics. So it's a pleasure to present this topic here. My presentation will cover mainly 7 sections. First, a brief introduction. Then I'm going to explain what our approach is. I am going to give an example of how we intend to apply this approach. Then I'm going to describe a couple of case studies where we are going to test this approach, and then the challenges that we are currently facing, what are our next steps, and the take-home message. Just to start, achieving water security is difficult, it's complex, it's time-consuming, it's expensive. On the other side, considering the water security risks in land planning and also water planning can help to increase people's and ecosystem resilience. However, the water security risk in river basins could be multiple. And then this is the main motivation for us to propose this approach in order to give to the river basin stakeholders or actors a tool for them to assess their water security risk and prioritize the risk management actions. Just as a general description of our process, I want to start describing this. And we start thinking about this, considering 2 main global drivers of change: climate change and socioeconomic change. Climate change modifies or affects the weather patterns and the hydrology in river basins. And this socioeconomic change can also modify the human activities like agriculture, manufacturing, services, including water and sanitation, household, and also can manifest in some multi-actor tensions or conflicts. All of this together is generating modifications in the water quantity and the water quality that we can have in a river basin. And these can also characterized by floods, landslides, droughts, the same water scarcity, and poor water quality. So our approach is considering these water security hazards, and together with exposure and vulnerabilities, the uncertainties and the judgment of the strength of the knowledge, we are going to assess the water security risk. And what we are proposing is to do this in 5 scales: country, river basin, community, and household or individual, and in 5 dimensions: health and well-being, infrastructure, economy and productivity, ecosystem services, and culture, justice, and peace. All of these together can help us to identify risk management actions or interventions, and it's very important to analyze these proposed actions to be sure that we are not going to create new risks or new hazards that make the situation more problematic. So now our approach is called MUISCA, and MUISCA stands for Multidimensional Risk Assessment, and it's a general process to assess and analyze water security risk with river basin stakeholders, considering the whole universe of consequences, but prioritizing the risk analysis with the river basin stakeholders. And after that, what we want is to help them to prioritize this, the risk management action, considering their water values. The foundations of MUISCA are water security, risk science, systems perspective, hydrocomplexity, participation of stakeholders, and prioritization process. Our approach is has mainly 6 steps. The first step is to define the predominant hazard for the basins. Then we are going to describe qualitatively all the consequences of those hazards and how they are interrelated. And then we are going to consult with river basin stakeholders what are those priority impacts that are going to be fully assessed in the step number 4. And with considering the hazard, exposure, vulnerability, uncertainties, and strength of the knowledge. And after that, we are going to produce some visualizations to communicate the risk. And then we are going to consult with the river basin stakeholders, what are their priorities to manage their water security risk. And it's very important also to mention that for this approach, we are proposing also considering the time and space. Space because sometimes the hazard is produced in one part of the river basin, but the risk is manifested in another area or another point. And time because we have also to clarify what are the time period we are going to use to analyze the hazard and the consequences of those hazards. An example of this approach is for the step number 1, we have 4 general divisions of hazards: floods, landslides, droughts, poor water quality. After that, what we want is to describe qualitatively these hazards, and we are going to produce tables like this that each hazard is going to be described for the scale and for the dimension. Then we are the consultation with about priority impacts with the stakeholders is going to depend on water values, and we are going to identify a short list of these impacts according to the tables I showed before, and we are going to ask to the participants to compare, discuss, and agree on priorities. And we are going to observe during this discussion that there are going to be ambiguities and discrepancies among them. And that's also an important thing to report in this study. The outcome that we are going to obtain in this step is the table like this, but now with few hazards that are going to be the priority for the next step. And then the full risk assessment of these prioritized hazards or consequences are going to have more numbers and more detail, depending of if we are going to do a quantitative risk assessment. But when we don't have enough information, or the information is still scarce or not, or we cannot trust that information, maybe we are going to do a more qualitative risk assessment. And also we have to report the uncertainties and the strength of the knowledge linked to those hazards and consequences. To visualize the risk, we are thinking about different kinds of like plots, charts, Sankey diagrams, maps, spider charts, lollipops, infographics. But the most important thing is that we hope that river basin stakeholders can give us feedback about this. If these visualizations are really communicating the risk that they are considering, or if this is something that we should modify. And then the final step is consultate with the stakeholders what is the risk management plan. Based on the scales of the consequences, maybe we are going to compare a risk that is manifesting at individual level with a risk that is manifesting at country level. And we are going to ask them to agree on priority on risk management strategies. And importantly, is we have to check if these suggested strategies are going to increase or modify the current level of risk and hazards, or are going to create new risk. Then the case studies that we are considering are in 2 municipalities in Colombia. Our hope that is already doing some work in the country partners that we have, that is in India, Malaysia, Ethiopia, the United Kingdom, and Colombia. And our colleague Mark and his team, they did an analysis of global flood modeling in these 5 countries. And but I also want to mention that because we are located in the Andean region, our terrain is also predominantly mountainous. So in those locations, like more rural locations, landslides are more important, specifically for water infrastructure. Because with landslides, we lose the water intakes, the aqueducts, the sewage networks, and then there is a public health implication when that happens. And the biggest city in this river basin is the city of Cali, has 2 million inhabitants, and is also their area is mainly flat valley, but also has some mountainous terrain. But the flat area is protected by a dike that is along the Cauca River. That's more or less a context of this. So what we are going to do is to study or apply this approach in 2 municipalities at the Upper Cauca River Basin. This basin is the southwest of Colombia. The Cauca River is the second largest river in Colombia. The largest one is the Magdalena River. And we are going to work in Jamundí and Cajibío, and an important characteristic of these municipalities is that they are crossed by 3 river basins. So here we are going to face a new challenge, is how to move from the political division as a municipality and to the river basin coverage and the authorities and institutions working at the river basin level. Just a brief description of these 2 municipalities. In area, they are kind of similar, but Jamundí has like a higher development, has more people, more households, better level of education, and also the access to water and sanitation. Jamundí has almost a universal coverage on drinking water, but it's not the same for sewage. It's still 87% coverage, but Cajibío is way behind. They only have 38% coverage of drinking water and 35% to sanitation. One important and exciting aspect of this work is that when we proposed MISCA, when we started thinking about this, we use a language, also a structure. But when we started socializing this with our hub partners from the other 4 countries, we got their feedback. We understood that MISCA can be translated into the local context, the local language. We are going to work with the river basin stakeholders, and then we are going to gather all those results and then translate it again into the MISCA structure. The challenges that we are currently facing is that, as I mentioned, there are 2 consultation processes, the step number 3 and the step number 6. And for this, we have to use a decision analysis tool. And there are multiple options to do this. And what we are thinking is that maybe we need to use only a combination of 2 or 3 or maybe more, because what we want is that we want to give voice to the people who are not usually heard or consulted during the risk management actions planning, and also not to prioritize only the voices or opinions or interests of people will have generally have or are more powerful in the river basin or the region. Another challenge is that, as I mentioned, we suggest to present the risk assessment in 5 dimensions. Also, we are wondering if we are going to be able to present or to express the risk in only one single metric and standard metric, or we need to do express the risk per each dimension in different metrics. If that was the case, how are we going to compare these risks? So this is a current challenge we are facing, and for this we are planning to conduct a literature review process with other members of the hub to try to identify how academics and also government agencies are suggesting to express water security risk. So the next steps in our work is first to start with this literature review, then get the ethics approval of this to go to Colombia and start working with the river basin stakeholders. And then we have to do a stakeholder analysis to identify who is interested in this, who can be impacted by this, and who could be influencing this project. And also doing some river walks to identify the area. This is mainly for the rest of the year 2022. And what I want you to think about this when you remember this presentation is that MUISCA is a general process that could be in between, like a more general, global and risk assessment, and is not so local, no specific, no detailed, but it could be adaptable. It is adaptable. It's working on water security. It's a participatory process, and also includes prioritization and includes people and ecosystems. Thank you for listening to me this morning. Please visit us in the social media, the webpage. And if you have any idea about the risk indicators or the decision analysis tool, please do email me. Thank you. These are some key references and the credits for the design of this slide. Thank you.
Carolina, do we have time for one question, I'd say? The one for that. Yeah. When you say, if you look, what is the novelty of the method? I mean, if you compare it to let's call it the classical process of risk assessment, participatory risk assessment that you define in some guidelines. What would be the aspects of risk that
for me, the multidimensional aspect that we are proposing to do it in 4 scales and 5 dimensions, so we can highlight that sometimes the impacts of these hazards are being manifested in under some specific conditions. And then we can highlight that sometimes there are these conflicts and their decision makers face with these conflicts on how to prioritize that. Should we, what is more important? I don't know, a pond with a high value of biodiversity, or sugarcane crop that is belongs to a big company producing sugar and high revenue for the whole country. So I think that that's the novelty of this project.